We continue learning Dirshu Mishnah Brura. We're in the middle of Siman, Kov Sadi Gimel, the halachis of Zimun. We begin by Sif Gimel. Says the Machaber, Mayoraychvim va'amru noyachal. If they're all riding together, and then some says, let's eat. Even though each one eats from his own loaf of bread, and they don't leave their behemoths to still mitzarfim from the fact that they said, let us eat together. Because they stopped in one place. Aval, however, continues the Machaber, if they're eating as they go, then there's no kaviyas and there's no zimun. Let's say they're eating the field, all spread out. Even though they all eat at one time, and maybe they all even share the food. There's no kvias, therefore there's no zimun. But says the Ramah, actually not arguing, adds the Ramah, the minhag is not to have a zimun in a house of a guy. Nearly Atam explains the Ramah, one is afraid of the house that he's in. That's a form of ikava. That's a form that's lacking permanence, as the fact the guy might make you leave at any moment, and therefore says the Ramah. That there's no zimun. And furthermore, you're worried. You're worried about the nusach of the bracha that you might have to say. And this is probably one of the rayas to the Ramesha, that if originally when you come, you're not kaveh yourself to be together, then you never have your zimun. Even without these reasons, it says the Ramah, very gishmak, and let's say these reasons don't exist. But says the Ramah, once this became the minhag, once the minhag is not to have a zimun in such a place, that by its very definition means that your mindset, that you were thinking that you were not over there, therefore there is no zimun. Says the Mishnah Brura, Sivkat and Chav Hey, Im Hayu Reichvim. If they are riding, Siv Zekel Shainei Mamish, Move Alal B'Sim Kuf Samazayin, Siv Yebez Al Shamayr Leini Noitza Berch Zamaitzi. Over there in Kuf Samazayin, we're talking about being Maitzi, the Brach of Amaitzi, one for another. Vachamayr Leini Tzir Zimun. But Dinach L'Shteim is the same halacha. Kvar Be'arti Sham Mishtabura Be'aritiv Ayin Sham. Holchem V'Holchem Loi. If you're eating while you're going, then there is no zimun. If you're sitting on a caravan, and while you're traveling, you're eating together. And as we're going to see in our world of cars, buses, trains, airplanes, this is for sure very relevant. What happens? And this happens often. You're not sure. Says the Mishnah Berurah, I'll tell you a rule. When you're not sure and you're three, you make a zimun. When it's 10 people, you got to be more careful about the Shem Hashem. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you know what you should do? Do a zimun even with 10. Just don't mention Hashem's name. Says the Mishnah Berurah. The Achronim argue in the base guy. What do you say over the Rachman when you're in a non-Jew's house? We bless and we thank and we ask Hashem to give blessing in our going and in our sitting forever. You could say because what is the Rachman going on? And this is one of the big sources that you see that, first of all, things go by the words that are intended, not necessarily the broad words. But number two, the care that one has to take with every word of a tefillah, with every word of a rachman, with every implication of that which he's saying. Says the Mishabru over here, when you say that you're benching the Baal Abayis, you mean the Baal Abayis, the Baal Suda, not the guy. But then even in Beis Yisrael you say Shecharachman v'Meichlam b'Maloim b'Yoyim derech Harai b'Beis Akom Efsher de'in ze kviyas imezamnin v'Toiv, and it ends the Mishnah Berurah. What's the best? Don't get involved in such a suffix. How? By making sure that in the beginning you didn't have in mind to eat together. So let's learn some of the Dirshus over here. Says the Dirshu 25. Dirshu note number 24. Says the Dirshu, when you're sitting on a wagon, what about in a boat? We learned prior with regard to Amaisi, Shepashin, according to Magravran, you mitzdarfin, it's a Kaviyas Gemura, and similarly says the Arach HaShulchan. And once we see that in a boat is a Kaviyas Gemura, of course, one can conjure up. If you have a group sitting in a coach bus, you have a group sitting in an airplane, Chayra, that would be the same thing. There is a kviyas when you're all eating together. The Chalik Tinagol and Asvina, the Graz explains Asvina is not considered maleches. So this is a new reason. I just said the reason is that it's more of a big and geshmakin area boat, and therefore you're all sitting together. The Graz says no. The Graz says that a boat by its very nature is not considered moving. There are makayos to this in the Gemara. Just the water is moving underneath it and it's floating on top of it. Whereas by a wagon, it's not the same thing. Based on this, says our Lutzion, says our Vazan the Shevet Alevi, it's the difference between a car and an autobus and an airplane. In a car and a bus, you could make a zimun without the Shem Hashem, like an agala. But when you're eating in an airplane, then you could even have 10. Why? Because it's kavua and the wind is just pushing you. However, continues Dirshu over here, one is sitting on a train, that there are tables, and there's a lot of space, says the Sefer Berachas Habayis, and the Mukhi Arachai and the Munkacher, Bevadai Mitzarfin, because that's a kavua, like a svina, like you're sitting in your house, or Chashochan, says the same thing. However, the Maruk Siyar of Yaakov Emdin writes that everything is totally b'shkitas nisi asam. Everything is totally in the dynamics of what's going on, whether you're bein amida, bein yeshiva, kavanas alev, we talk about ba'agala that's moving around, and you're bumping around, that it's hard to be mechavein, to listen, and a boat, that there's a foul smell, says the Marxia, even then it's not a halachic din, says the Marxia, that the boat's not moving. If the boat is shaking you around and you can't breathe and you can't smell and you can't hear, then you won't have a kviyas. But if it's not that way, it's calm, then you would be able to have a zimun. Says the Beis Baruch, if one is on a train, one is in a car, and certainly if one is in an airplane, there'll be a zimun. Finally concludes Rav Shaimer that you are mitzdarfin like a boat. And finally, while the wagon is not moving, certainly you have a tziruf. And I guess we'll end that avada and avada we can understand in nowadays, many years after all these poskim are writing, that of course the trains, the buses, the coach buses, the airplanes are that much more kaviyas. But again, it's only if you're eating together. If you happen to be eating your meal and the guy next to you is eating his meal and there's no kaviyas and you happen to have just, both in there together, that will not be. But it'll often be relevant. A family traveling together, a yeshiva traveling together, a group traveling together, eating together, then you would, yes, have a kviyas. We continue. Dirshu number 25 quotes Chai Adam Achrazah, and the Nishmas Adam explains, and therefore, the Zimun who davar shavach, there's no problem. Hashem Shemar Levatal, there's no problem. But if you're being mighty, someone else says Chai Adam, then we're not sure if in a wagon you're going to be mitzdaref. Again, we just explained that it's going to be based on the practicalities of each case and whether there is indeed a kviyas, whether there is indeed a normalcy to hear the zimun, etc. Let's continue with Sif Dalit. Says the Machaber, if you look at pass, Once you say Amaitzi together, you're not allowed to leave. You're considered one group. Says the Mishnah Hainu Sivkat Chavchas In Rashayin Lachalik. Feel right. Said Ligmar Sudas Kodesh Shigmar Chem. You want to finish quickly. Kiv Shachivit Shal Zima Chal Kvar Alav Etzchil Achil Shalai. Therefore, you cannot remove yourself. We'll pick it up from Sif A in the next year. B'siyata Dishmaya.